You know what smell will stop a grown man dead in his tracks? Sweet potato pie cooling on a windowsill. I don't care how old he is or how far from home he's gone. That smell will reach right out and pull him back to his mama's kitchen before he even realizes what happened. I've seen it happen more times than I can count. My neighbor, Mr. Earl, used to walk past my house every Tuesday morning, and every time I had a pie cooling in that window, that man would stop right there on the sidewalk, close his eyes, and just stand there breathing it in. That's what these recipes do, baby. They carry us home. Come on in and sit down. Pull up a chair at my kitchen table and let me talk to you for a while. I'm Gloria, and I am 81 years old, and I have been in kitchens my whole life. What I want to share with you today has been sitting heavy on my heart. We are losing recipes, not just the instruction, we are losing the stories. The reason a dish was made, the hands that first made it, the feeling it gave a family when everything else was hard. Those things don't get written down. They pass from one set of hands to another, and when those hands are gone, the recipe goes with them. Today I'm sharing 20 sweet treats from our grandmama's kitchens that you almost never see anymore. I'll tell you how to make every one of them right here in the telling, the same way my grandmother told me. Not from a cookbook, but from memory and love. Before we get started, I need to tell you something. My grandmother, Mama Lottie, she made a cake she only made 2 or 3 times a year. She called it her Sunday stack cake. I'm going to tell you all about it before this video ends. What was in it, how she made it, and why the day she taught me is one of the most treasured memories of my life. But you have to stay with me because that story belongs near the end. Now, let us begin. Number 1, sweet potato pie. Let me start here with the one that started this whole video in my mind. I know some of you will say people still make sweet potato pie. And yes, some do, just not the way our grandmamas made it. Back then you dug those sweet potatoes out of the ground in fall, boiled them whole, and pushed them through a sieve by hand. Nutmeg, cinnamon, a touch of ginger, butter, eggs, cane sugar. Not too much because the potato was already sweet. The crust was lard-based and tender enough to shatter at a fork. My grandmother kept hers on a cake stand covered with a dish towel, and you were not allowed to cut into it until Sunday dinner was finished. She'd say, "The pie is patient. You can be patient too." I think about that every time I make one. Number 2, tea cakes. Tea cakes are not a cookie, and they are not a biscuit. They are their own thing entirely. Soft, thick, lightly sweet rounds of flour, butter, sugar, eggs, milk, and vanilla. Sometimes a pinch of nutmeg, cut with whatever round thing was handy. They came out pale on top and golden on the bottom, with a tenderness you don't find in any store-bought cookie. My mother made them every Friday without fail. By 3 o'clock, the whole house smelled like butter and vanilla, and my brother James and I each got two while they were still barely warm. Two, not one more. I made tea cakes for my own children. Now my granddaughter makes them for hers. That is exactly how it's supposed to work. Number 3, socket to me cake. This cake has a name that makes people smile before they ever taste it. A rich butter cake with a swirl of cinnamon, brown sugar, and pecans through the middle, finished with a thin powdered sugar glaze. Baked in a bundt pan, it came out with that pretty ridge shape that looked like great effort, even though it wasn't. My Aunt Vera brought one to every church homecoming I can remember, set it in the center of the dessert table, and people drifted toward it before she got her coat off. She never wrote the recipe down, said she was going to. She never did. We've spent 30 years trying to get it right from memory, and I believe we're close. Number 4, crackling bread pudding. When you had leftover cornbread, you didn't throw it away. You crumbled it up, added eggs, sweet milk, butter, sugar, and vanilla, and poured it into a baking dish and let the oven work a miracle. What came out was dense and moist in the middle, with edges that crisped where butter met the pan. The crackling part came from bits of pork crackling, folded into the batter, giving it a salty, smoky depth against all that sweetness. You served it warm, sometimes with sweetened cream poured over the top, the kind of dessert that felt like being tucked in. Number 5, fried apple hand pies. These little half moon pies were made for people on the move. You made a simple dough, cooked down apple filling with brown sugar, cinnamon, and butter until it was soft and syrupy. Wrapped it inside circles of dough, crimped the edges with a fork, and fried them in a cast iron skillet until golden on both sides. The outside was crispy and blistered. When you bit through it, you hit warm spiced apple that had thickened up just right. Portable, filling, and wonderful, eaten straight from the skillet. You were supposed to wait at the table. Sometimes you didn't wait. I was just thinking about my mother's kitchen on a Friday night. She worked 5.5 days a week cleaning other people's houses, and she came home tired in her body, but never in her spirit. Every Friday before she changed her clothes, she'd wash her hands and start pulling from the cabinet. Quiet and steady, no production made of it. By supper, something sweet was always resting on the counter. Her way of saying, "We made it through another week. Here's the sweetness that belongs to us." I didn't understand that as a child. Now that I'm 81, I understand everything. Number 6, blackberry cobbler with lard crust. Come summertime, when the blackberries were thick along the fence rows, children were sent out with buckets and told not to come back until they were full. You came back purple-handed and scratched from the briars, and your grandmother knew exactly what to do with every berry. She'd pour them into a deep dish with sugar and a little flour, lay a rough lard crust over the top, tuck the edges in, and bake it until everything was bubbling and golden. There is something about a lard crust that butter cannot replicate, tender in a way that almost melts before it flakes. My grandmother said lard was honest. I've decided she was right. Number 7, molasses stack cookies. These cookies look a little plain, and then you eat one and wonder why you ever bothered with anything else. Made with dark blackstrap molasses, flour, baking soda, ginger, cinnamon, and clove, rolled thin and baked until just set, dark and fragrant with a slight chew. The stack in the name came from how they were stored, layered in a tin between wax paper. After a day or two, they'd soften at the edges and become even better than they were fresh. My grandfather ate these with his coffee every morning. He didn't say much about what he liked, but whenever Mama Lottie made a batch, he'd say, "Lottie, these are fine." High praise from a quiet man. Number 8, boiled custard. Boiled custard is more of a drink than a dessert, but it belongs on this list because it was a Christmas tradition in so many Southern families and has nearly vanished. Made on the stove top with whole milk, egg yolks, sugar, and vanilla, cooked low and slow and stirred constantly until it thickened enough to coat a spoon, chilled down and poured into cups. It tasted like eggnog's sweeter, gentler cousin. At Christmas, the grown folks got a splash of bourbon. The children got theirs plain. We always thought the grown folks had the better deal, and I suppose we were right. My great aunt made a gallon every Christmas Eve. It was gone by Christmas morning, every single year. Number 9, persimmon pudding. If you grew up where wild persimmon trees grew, you know. And if you didn't, a wild persimmon eaten before the first frost will make your mouth pucker so fast your eyes cross. After that frost, though, those little orange fruits turn sweet and almost honeyed, and the pudding made from their pulp is one of the most beautiful things you've ever tasted. You pressed the pulp through a sieve, mixed it with eggs, sugar, milk, flour, butter, and warm spices, and baked it low until it set into something dense and fragrant, almost like moist gingerbread, but uniquely its own. You cannot describe persimmon pudding to someone who has never had it. You just have to make them one and let the pudding do the talking. That's what my grandmother always said. Number 10, syrup cake. This is a plain cake, and I mean that as the highest compliment. Cane syrup, flour, eggs, butter, baking soda, and warm spice, ginger or cinnamon. You poured it in a square pan and baked it until the whole house smelled like something sacred. Syrup cake was what you made when sugar was scarce because cane syrup gave a deep, slightly smoky sweetness that refined sugar doesn't have. Some glazed the top with more syrup while it was warm. Some ate it plain. It showed up when it was needed and never let anybody down. I want to tell you about church homecoming. If you were raised in the black church in the South, you know. Homecoming Sunday was the one day a year when everybody came back. People who'd moved north, people away at college, old members returning to see who was still standing. The women laid out a spread on those long folding tables that would make you weep. The dessert table was something you had to see to believe. Every woman brought her best, and there was an unspoken competition that nobody acknowledged, but everyone understood. That table is where I first tasted half the recipes I'm sharing today, standing at 8 years old, plate in hand, not knowing I was getting an education that would last my whole life. Number 11, hummingbird cake. Hummingbird cake came along later than most of the others, but it became a Southern classic so fast it feels like it's always been here. Crushed pineapple, mashed ripe bananas, pecans, warm spices, folded into a batter that bakes into moist, dense layers, frosted generously with cream cheese frosting. It is a big, beautiful, joyful cake. My daughter made one for my 70th birthday and put 11 candles on it because she said 11 was more manageable than 70. That cake was taller than it had any right to be, and it was the best thing I ate that whole year. I told her so, she cried, I cried, and then we each had 2 slices and felt considerably better. Number 12, butter roll. Here is one I am truly afraid is going to disappear if we don't hold on to it. A butter roll is a dessert. Soft dough rolled thin, spread with butter, sugar, and cinnamon, rolled up and sliced into rounds. Those rounds go into a baking dish covered with a warm, sweet milk and butter sauce, then into the oven. As it bakes, the sauce soaks in and caramelizes around the edges, and what you pull out is sticky and golden and impossibly tender. My grandmother made these on cold Sunday mornings, and we ate them before church. I can still feel the warmth of that kitchen, the cold pressing against the windows. Some mornings I think that might be what heaven looks like, and I'm at peace with that. I want to stop right here for a moment. Down in the comments, I want you to tell me, what sweet treat do you remember from your grandmother's kitchen? What recipe are you afraid is going to be lost? Write it down there. Tell me the story. That is exactly what this channel is for. Keeping these memories alive together so none of us has to be the last one who remembers. And if nobody's told you to subscribe yet, I'm telling you now, hit that button because we have so many more stories to share. All right, let's keep going. I still haven't told you about Mama Lottie's stack cake. Number 13, sweet potato pone. Don't confuse this with sweet potato pie. Pone is made from raw grated sweet potato, not cooked and mashed, mixed with butter, molasses, eggs, spices, and a little flour, then baked low and slow until it's set into something dense and almost chewy with deep caramelized sweetness. The texture was unlike anything else. Not pudding, not cake, something that held its shape when cut but yielded to the fork like it had been waiting for you. The edges got darker and crispier, almost candied, and those edges were the prize. Everyone at the table wanted a corner piece. Someone always got left out, and that was always a point of discussion. Number 14, chess pie. Nobody can fully explain where the name came from. Some say it's a corruption of cheese pie. Some say a baker once shrugged and said Jess's pie, and the name stuck. Whatever it means, chess pie is a simple egg, custard, butter, sugar, eggs, a little cornmeal, and a splash of vinegar to cut the sweetness. That's nearly all there is to it, and yet it produces a pie with a golden, crackled top and a filling so rich and smooth it almost overwhelms you in the best possible way. It was a poor man's pie made from pantry staples, but nobody who ever ate a good chess pie called it poor food. They called it perfect food, and they were right. Number 15, coconut candy patties. Homemade coconut candy, made on the stove in a cast iron skillet. You cooked a simple sugar syrup, stirred in shredded coconut and vanilla, and dropped spoonfuls onto wax paper to harden. About the size of a silver dollar, rough edged and made entirely by hand. They tasted like pure sweetened coconut with a candied shell that clicked when you tapped it. My great grandmother made a batch every Christmas and distributed them to all the neighbors, wrapped in wax paper tied with saved ribbon, because you saved everything back then. She said everyone deserved a little sweetness at Christmas. She meant every word. Let me tell you what it was like to stand in Mama Lottie's kitchen. She was not a tall woman, but she filled every room she walked into. She kept her flour in a big wooden bin and could scoop exactly what she needed without ever measuring. Every time it was right. When she finally let me help, she stood behind me and guided my hands, not with words, with her hands over mine, showing me the pressure, the motion, the feel of dough that was right versus dough that needed more. You cannot learn that from a recipe card. You can only learn it from someone who loves you enough to teach you. I think about those hands every time I bake. Number 16, peach dumplings. Come August, when the peaches were ripe, you made peach dumplings. Simple biscuit dough wrapped around whole peeled peach halves, placed in a baking dish, covered with a warm brown sugar and butter sauce, and baked until the dough was golden and the peach inside had turned soft and syrupy. You served them warm with cold cream poured straight from the pitcher. This was summer on a plate, the taste of knowing school was coming and wanting to hold on to sweetness just a little while longer. Number 17, tea cakes, dipped in cane syrup. We talked about tea cakes already, but this variation deserves its own mention entirely. After the tea cakes had cooled and sat in their tin for a day, some folks would dip one edge, or the whole flat bottom, into warm cane syrup, just thinned enough to be runny. Set on wax paper to dry, what you got was a cookie with a thin, crackly, sweet coating that gave it a whole second layer of flavor. The syrup added something darker, something earthier, that turned a plain tea cake into something unforgettable. My cousin Rosalie would not eat a plain tea cake, not one. But syrup dipped, she'd eat them until someone told her to stop. And sometimes after that too. Number 18, brown sugar pie. Brown sugar pie is chess pie's close cousin, but the brown sugar gives it a depth white sugar doesn't have. A molasses undertone that makes the filling taste almost like a praline in pie form. Butter, brown sugar, eggs, a little flour, cream, and vanilla poured into an unbaked shell and baked until the top is golden and slightly shiny. The filling was like a dense, smooth caramel that yielded to the fork just right. This was a holiday pie, made when someone didn't have pecans but had brown sugar and creativity. It filled the same spot on the table and left nobody feeling shortchanged. Number 19, fig preserves. Cake down south, if you had a fig tree in the yard, and many families did, you put those figs up all summer. One of the finest things you could do with a jar of thick, dark fig preserves was put them in a spice cake. Cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, allspice. Warm spices throughout the batter. With a full cup of preserves, stir it right in. The figs kept the cake moist for days and gave it a dense, tender crumb. This cake improved with time. Day 2 was better than day 1. Day 3 better than day 2. And by day 4, all the flavors had married and deepened into something that had fully become itself. My grandmother called it a patient cake, a wise cake. I think she was talking about herself. I need to say one more thing before our last recipe. You can't understand why these recipes matter without understanding what they came from. There were seasons, whole years sometimes, when sugar was scarce, eggs were rationed, and sweetness came from syrup and molasses because that was all there was. And our grandmamas could take those humble things and make something that felt like abundance. That is not a small thing. The ability to take very little and make it feel like plenty. That is a gift and a practice, and it is worth honoring every time we step into a kitchen and remember whose hands came before ours. Number 20. Sunday, stack cake, the payoff. I promised you Mama Lottie's Sunday stack cake, and here we are. Stack cake is one of the oldest Southern recipes there is, and it was once a wedding cake. Not because it was fancy, but because a whole community made it together. Each family brought a single thin cake layer baked at home, and those layers were stacked with apple butter spread between them. The more layers your stacked cake had, the more beloved the family was. That is how people measured love back then, in layers. Mama Lottie's version was for family. She made it for Easter, Christmas, and the dinner after a funeral when the whole church came to our house. She spent 2 full days on it. The layers were made from a soft dough, flour, butter, molasses, buttermilk, eggs, ginger, cinnamon, and baking soda, rolled thin and baked one at a time until they were set and dry and pale, almost like thick ginger snaps. The filling was dried apples she'd put up herself in the fall, cooked low and slow with sugar and warm spices until they became a thick, dark, fragrant sauce. The whole house smelled of spiced apples for hours before you ever tasted a single bite. Then she assembled it, layer of cake, layer of filling, all the way up, wrapped it in a dish towel, and set it to rest overnight. You did not eat it the day you made it. You had to wait. And overnight, those layers softened, absorbed the filling, and transformed from separate things into one unified, glorious cake that sliced clean and showed those beautiful layers of dark apple, filling alternating with spiced cake. The first bite tasted ancient and wise and purely, completely good. The day Mama Lottie taught me to make it, I was 13 years old. She hadn't told me she'd decided I was ready. She just called me into the kitchen on a November Saturday and said, "Come here, pay attention. I'm only going to show you this once." I paid attention to every second of it. I was afraid to blink. She showed it to me 3 times over 3 years, then handed me the apron and watched me do it myself. When I was done, she was quiet for a long moment, and then she said 3 things. "Your filling is a little thin," pause, "but the layers are even." Longer pause. "Your grandfather is going to like this." I have been chasing that kind of compliment my whole life. I still am. So there they are, all 20 of them, right there on the table like a spread from the best church dinner you ever attended in your life. Sweet potato pie cooling on the stand. Tea cakes stacked in their tin. Sock it to me cake sitting proud on the dessert table right next to a pan of crackling bread pudding. Fried apple hand pies, still warm from the skillet. Blackberry cobbler with that honest lard crust bubbling up golden at the edges. Molasses stacked cookies layered in wax paper. Boiled custard chilled down and ready for Christmas Eve. Persimmon pudding, syrup cake, hummingbird cake, and butter roll. sweet potato pone with those candied edges everybody fought over, chess pie, coconut candy patties, peach dumplings drowning in cold cream, tea cakes dipped in cane syrup, brown sugar pie, fig preserves cake getting better by the day. And right there at the center of it all, Mama Lottie's Sunday stack cake. 20 recipes, 20 stories, 20 reasons to remember the women who made them and to make sure nobody forgets. Every one of these recipes was made by someone doing the best they could with what they had, for the people they loved, not to impress anybody. Made for kitchens and tables and families and children who would remember them for the rest of their lives. That's what food is for, at its best. Not a performance, not a competition. An act of love repeated over and over, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. Don't let these recipes disappear. Make them, mess them up, and make them again. Write them down somewhere safe. Teach them to somebody who wants to learn. Stand in your kitchen. Think about whose hands taught your hands. Feel grateful and let that gratitude come out in what you make. That is how these recipes survive this long. That is how they'll keep surviving through you. Next time, we're going to talk about the breads our grandmamas made. The kind that don't require a recipe card and taste like everything you've ever missed. Don't miss that one. Take care of yourself, baby, and go make something sweet.